Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. I am Maria Rosa Vaquerizo, CEO of the Andean American Associations, and I would like to welcome each and every one of you to today's program. This program is being hosted by the Ecuadorian American Association, and it has been organized because it's a very important and timely conversation. We're having this afternoon Ecuador's post-referendum climate. Our panelists are Santiago Mosquera and Walter Spurrier Vaquerizo. We're grateful to all of you for your participation. The Ecuadorian American Association was incorporated in the U.S. in 1932, becoming the first chamber of commerce for Ecuador and in the U.S. Our association has hosted timely and informative programs featuring the leaders of Ecuador. It's celebrating its 93rd anniversary this year. We're very grateful for the interest that our programs generate. Today, we have over 100 registrants. We welcome a distinguished list of participants, including we have Pablo Vallejo. He's a leadership circle for Banco de Pichincha, and he's also our director. Sebastián Hurtado of Profitas, Lucila Barbeito, the JP Morgan Chase, and Chris Carrington of Alvarez and Marsal. Also, we have representatives from many financial institutions. We have Asobanca, BNP Paribas, Citi, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Mitsui, Morgan Stanley, Terra Bank, and Wells Fargo. For the multinationals and key institutions, we have the International Finance Corporation and the International Monetary Fund. Rating agencies, we welcome Fitch, and for media, we have Reuters. So welcome to each and every one of you, and thank you again for your interest in our programs. Please note that our speakers' remarks are their own views and not expressions or positions of the Ecuadorian American Association. For the Q&A session following the presentation, you may write your questions at any time by means of the Q&A button. At the bottom of the page, you're going to have a button there for Q&A, and you can do your questions throughout the presentation, and they will be answered at the end. And now it's my pleasure to present the president of the Ecuadorian American Association, Juana Caicedo Selinger. She is the senior vice president at UBS Financial Services in New York. Juana, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Maria Rosa. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to welcome you today to today's meeting. On November 16, Ecuadorians went to the polls to vote on a 4-question referendum proposed by President Daniel Noboa. The referendum included the initiation of a process to draft a new constitution and establishment of foreign military bases. The referendum was decisively rejected by the Ecuadorians. The rejection of key proposals raising questions about the challenges faced by President Noboa in implementing his reform agenda. We are fortunate to have with us Santiago Mosquera and Walter Spurrier, distinguished speakers who will discuss the implications and challenges of this rejection for the future of Ecuador. I'm going to introduce briefly our panelist. Walter Spurrier is an economic analyst with a master's degree in political science from the University of California, UCLA. He is a director of Political Economic Report Weekly Analysis and also is president of the Spurrier Group. He provide consultation services to various institutions and companies and conduct workshop seminar focuses on Ecuador macroeconomic scenarios. Currently, he's advisor to the Chambers of Commerce of Industry of Guayaquil, a member of the Board of Regents at the University Casa Grande in Guayaquil. Santiago Mosquera earned a PhD in economics from Fordham University in New York. He is currently head of research of Analytica Investments and Dean of Business School of the University de las Americas in Quito. Also, he's senior advisor of LYC, a global company in marketing and corporate affairs. From 2011 to 2014, he was a director at the Latin American Sovereigns Group of Fitch Rating based in New York. Prior to joining Fitch, he was a senior economist at HIS Global Insight based in Philadelphia. So I'll invite Santiago to start the program.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Maria Rosa, Juana, Alexandra. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and share the space with Walter. And I'm very happy to see many friends and colleagues among the participants in the meeting today. Ecuador is actually returning to more normal conditions after the results of November 16. The government of President Daniel Noboa received a negative response from the population on all 4 questions, including the one to set up a new constitutional assembly with a clear mandate to write a new constitution, where almost 62% of the population, of the voters, said no. The response from the private sector has been relatively positive domestically. It is important to remember that the business community was happy this past April when President Daniel Noboa won the presidential election. After a couple of difficult years, the private sector had the opportunity to finally focus on their business without the noise of new electoral processes that could change business conditions. Given that uncertainty, people was extremely happy to see President Noboa winning back in April. They thought they had at least 4 years of relatively peace without major political noise. President Noboa's decision to consult the electorate again on the setup of a new constitutional assembly brought back all of these fears again. Well, it is true that the current constitution has ample room for improvements, and I'm sure if we ask the participants, we can figure out at least 10, 15 things that can be improved in the current constitution. This potential change would put Ecuador in a new long electoral process with the business community and households, because this is something that is not only affecting companies, but also families. They will put their investment and consumption plans on hold again. This is something that we have suffered in Ecuador for a number of years. First, after the victory of President Guillermo Lasso, then after his first 2 years in office, the call for Muerte Cruzada, then the presidential election, then President Noboa won the election, but he has to go to the electoral process again. But finally, in April, we have these 4 years of apparently peace. So when the president called for the new electoral process, people start to be concerned about what the potential changes this new constitutional could bring. Talking about the economy, things are stable, not great in terms of economic growth, but it's stable. The economy in this year is growing again, as you know, after a difficult 2024. But so far, if you see across industry sectors or from the demand side perspective, the rebound is mostly explained by a weak base observed during the first and second quarters of 2024. And the economy has the potential to grow this year, maybe 3.5%, with unexpected deceleration in 2026, going back to a GDP growth of approximately 2%. External accounts are very strong in Ecuador right now. The current account surplus continue to post record numbers thanks to solid export growth, favorable commodity prices, especially with cocoa, gold, not oil, but the other components have seen favorable commodity prices. And the start of this whole picture is the strong family remittances. Thanks to the current account, the public debt disbursements for the public sector, there is ample liquidity in the domestic market, and we see in the financial system ample deposits, with deposits growing at a faster pace than lending, and for that reason, the financial system enjoys a large liquidity level right now. This is exactly the opposite of what we had in the first quarter of 2024, when there was liquidity scarcity in the domestic market. There are some sources of concern that we can identify going forward, and the first one is the fiscal front and then security. While Ecuador continues to pass program reviews in the extended fund facility with the IMF with, I will say, flying marks, fiscal consolidation is still limited. And you can see that with the budget for 2026 that was approved this Saturday. Debt continues to rise, and while the debt burden is manageable, especially when you compare to other countries in the same rating category, the repayment profile in Ecuador is extremely demanding in the next 4 years. Initially, early in this year, the repayment profile was demanding not only, but especially in 2026 and 2027. But after new debt placements taking place during the electoral process in early months of this year, there has been a deterioration in the repayment profile, and now the next 4 years look really difficult to cover. Then security is another source of concern, and there is some progress in terms of captures of key leaders of crime organizations, but the number of homicides have increased almost 50% when you compare the first half of this year to the same period in 2024. And not only that the crime rate has increased, the crimes have become much more violent. Despite all of this, global markets continue to see value in Ecuador debt, with a bond rally observed even after the relatively weak electoral results. Bond prices retreated on the day after the referendum on that Monday, but since then it has recovered. The electoral result is, in my opinion, a better outcome than a scenario where the government would have won with a thin margin, because in that case, the uncertainty going forward would have been huge. And I'm sure the markets would have penalized Ecuador in that case. The outcome we have right now, however, requires from the government to operate with the majority it has in the Legislative Assembly, which has been evident in the last 2 weeks, because during the week after the referendum, there were some pieces of legislation that were approved thanks to the majority that the government still has. And we saw a similar outcome during this Saturday session when the budget for 2026 was approved. Reforms will have to go through the assembly, and the government, under these circumstances, after these negative results on November 16, the government and the president will have to pay more attention on how new bills are sent to the assembly in order to avoid any kind of blockage or rejection that would have come from the Constitutional Court. To summarize, in my opinion, conditions have improved. The level of political noise has decreased. The economy is performing well and shows the strongest external position Ecuador has had in history. So what we need in order to move forward and in order to have better prospects, We need more fiscal discipline and we need more fiscal consolidation. And especially we need improvements on the security front, where it is not that clear what the strategy from the government is. I'm sure there is one. I'm sure there is some group of people in the government who understand what the strategy going forward is, but it is not communicated properly to the rest of the population. So if we have improved fiscal conditions, more fiscal consolidation, and security improves in 2026, I think things in Ecuador could improve substantially. So with that part, with those remarks, I complete my part and I go back to you, Juanita.
All right, yeah, thank you very much, Santiago. So now, Walter, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Juanita. Very nice presentation, Santiago. I agree much with you. Alexandra, Maria Rosa. It's yes, it was a setback for Noboa, but now he has to look for his plan B, and it actually looks better than plan A. It's I think the markets read it right. Interest fell. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but Fitch ratings improved for Ecuador. JP Morgan also agreed that things didn't look that bad, that it was pretty good solution, the one we had. And now what is plan B? To begin with, it's now that new elections for Constitutional Assembly and the three-vote process that required it would take the whole year. As Santiago reminds us, Chile had something like that. Now, there's no elections, no meaningful elections until February 2029. So Noboa doesn't have to worry about short-term unpopularity or reaction to any moves that people would not be fully happy with. Some people would say, but we have a midterm election. Yes, but at the midterm election, we only elect mayors and equivalent of governors. And those posts today are in the hand of the opposition. So the worst case scenario is that they continue in the hands of the opposition. In circumstances, the local government in Ecuador depends from money being sent from the central government. It needs to be sent by law, but sometimes it just doesn't flow that easily. So that means that pressure to increase handouts to the population to improve his side in case of elections, that's out of the question. He doesn't need to do that. So what does the market read in what Noboa has been doing? He has taken in his 2 years in the administration, because most of the time in administration was completing the last term, he increased VAT in 3 points, which is not a minor thing, and he eliminated the huge subsidy on diesel oil and finished up the elimination of what remained of subsidy in gasoline. So in other words, he has taken measures that it was not possible for other predecessors to take. Now, what he wanted to do with the Constitutional Assembly, he wanted to ease laws regarding police power. Our Constitution tilts very much towards the rights of the individual vis-a-vis the state, which is good when, particularly when things are calm, so you don't have abuses from the authorities. But right now, that it's hampering the administration's possibility of hunting criminals. The law implies that it's better for people to spend their jail terms at home, and so criminals are being sent home. And sometimes the very same day in the afternoon, after they are released from jail, they are caught committing a different crime. So he wants to make tougher. He wanted to make tougher the laws regarding the fight against crime. And the other was the severe limitations that the Constitution has on private investment in energy, all kinds of energy, because it's reserved to the state, and if the state cannot handle those investments, then the state should contract with companies from other states. In other words, other public sector companies belonging to other states, which means we have had in oil companies such as Belarus oil company, so having a major European or American company. And he wanted to do that because also the Constitution says if the state cannot do it and government institutions from foreign countries cannot do it, then the third option is private corporations under a very complex system. He wanted to change that. Now, what is his new strategy? First of all, he had to look over the success of his policies of hiring or having in his cabinet only very young people. Apparently, Novoa believes that you cannot trust anybody over 40. Now he had to go back on that, and he selected a former member of the Constitutional Court, somebody who was in the opposition to the current majority. The current majority is very much a woke majority. They believe that modern society should be rolled back because it harms the environment. And he is going to, first of all, write the laws, the executive orders, and also the attempts to change to modify the Constitution in terms that will be palatable or acceptable to the current court. And in addition, he is going to start dialoguing with the court, saying that you just cannot, you have to realize that we live in a very unsecure environment, too much violence, that we need to have a private investment in large amounts, and that you are blocking that because you believe that if you have more investment, it means some little animals are going to be upset hearing all that noise. So you have to modify your extreme position. I think there is a pretty good chance that we'll have success in that. The previous attempts of Novoa before the referendum was to organize demonstrations and demonstrate in front of the court, and that didn't work. Now, there is concern. One of the questions that have been put to us is, what does this mean for oil and mining? Now, Novoa has become very much aware that he needs oil and mining to be developed because there are the two areas where he could have hefty amounts of foreign investment. And in addition, it's going to bring in revenues. And in essence, it's going to change the climate of Ecuador's perspectives, and it's going to improve the economy in all different areas. So actually, even in the budget, he is budgeting unrealistic income for 2026 on companies putting an initial down payment on the concessions, oil and mining concessions they would get. It's unrealistic because we're not ready to even call for those tenders and believe that we're going to have revenues in 2026 regarding a new investment in oil and mining, but that shows what the government thinks they're going to do. Now, in terms of what I just mentioned, the difficulties of having private investment in oil and also in energy, that's the reason why we have had problems with energy supplies, and we have had blackouts. There is going to be, we're going to have, through the new person in charge, the new former member of the Constitutional Court in charge of writing any laws, we're going to reduce the impact of that ban in the administration by in subtle ways, intelligent laws, intelligent changes. For instance, we are not allowed to have to sign treaties, investment treaties. But in contract with the oil companies or mining countries, we could agree in a contract essentially the same clauses there are in investment treaties. So there will be a subtle way to get by this ban. So we're going to move into having reforms that are going to make it easier to contract investment in oil. On oil, we're in a very difficult situation at present because after the Constitutional Court engineered this referendum on the ITT field, we've had to stop developing the only field which was in the process of being developed. All the other oil fields that we have are already fully developed. So if we're not going to be able to continue with that field, the ATT, we need to bring new areas to tender. And one dominant area is going to be the Gulf of Guayaquil, after all the great success that Peru is having in prospection and exploration right on the other side of the border of the Gulf of Guayaquil. So I think we're going to see developments in that area. In terms of mining, the main problem we have presently with mining is that the very clever work that environmental groups have been doing to prevent Ecuador to develop its mining sector. They have fed information to the officials from Cuenca and Azuay, which is the third largest population and an economic center of Ecuador, that a new mine being about to be developed called Loma Larga, it would affect the water supply of Cuenca. And so people in Cuenca, they may not know if that's true or not, but definitely they don't want to find out if it is. So they have demonstrated against that project and is presently being stalled. But the other thing that the government doesn't know exactly how it's going to proceed in that, because legally what they have done in Cuenca with this air block, which is handled by Dundee Metals from Canada. But until they find a solution to that particular project, they are trying to speed up processes, very complicated processes, proving processes for other major projects. What they have done since the Ministry of the Environment was blocking most new concessions or permits, environmental permits, the government has started merging the Ministry of the Environment with the Ministry of Oil. So we have a Ministry of Energy and Environment, which is able to make sure that the environmental permits even are approved or denied, but not shelved as they have been currently. So we do expect important progress in the sides in terms of current mining prospects. Now there is a question on why does the mining cadaster has not been opened, or whether it has been opened. And that's mining cadaster was closed by Lenin Moreno in 2018, and actually it's a problem, yes, that it's not been opened yet. But the current authorities believe too many concessions were granted to firms that were only speculating, that have been holding those concessions, waiting for other mines to develop, and then be able to transfer, to sell their rights at an important premium. So what they have just slapped a new tariff for they called mining security, and that means that the people just cannot sit there and hold the rights to mining without doing anything about it, because it's going to cost plenty of money. So they expected many of those speculators to return their mines, and so they can bring it out for legitimate mining companies to take them. So in that sense, I think we have seen very slow progress, but there has been progress on this respect. We have just a security issue is very important, and there has been more violence and more death. But that has to do with the fact that we have in Ecuador a terror fight between the two largest Mexican cartels, Sinaloa and Jalisco Nueva Generación, and they are fighting to see who's going to control the transportation and of Colombian coke to the ports or whatever to take it back north. And so there's a lot of fighting for turf. But what you see is that they just go and machine gun a whole family or a whole group of friends at a meeting. And that's just not regular crime. That's not they're trying to kidnap somebody or whatever for ransom. It's just one to eliminate enemies. So I think that if you abstract that type of killings, I don't think Ecuador's crime situation is worth, say, that of Peru. I think it's this fight between criminal gangs that makes it worse. So that doesn't mean that the normal citizens, as myself, will feel safe, or are careless about how we go around. But it means that if we avoid getting together with coke dealers and having a drink with them, well, we're still somewhat safe. So in that sense, how are we going forward? I think that with these conditions that I mentioned about not having election until February 2029 and having as a background what Novoa has already done to improve his fiscal situation, I do think that he probably, with a little help from my friends, in this case Donald Trump, pressure in the IMF or whatever, I think Ecuador is going to be able to get over the hurdle of paying the bonds coming due from next year on. This is going to be able to issue new bonds, not to increase debt, but to let's say change bonds coming due with bonds at a longer term. And I think that's going to be. I think there's now a pretty good likelihood that would happen. And then in the private economy, private experts are doing very well, but much depends on the still pending agreement with the U.S., with Trump. Trump is a very tough negotiator with Latin American countries, not only, also with Ukraine, But so far, at this stage, all what the U.S. has granted Ecuador in exchange for all what Ecuador has agreed to do has been eliminating the 15% Liberation Day taxes surcharge, which is already liberated every other country in the world from. In other words, we still haven't gotten any concession, but apparently they would do some. We expect those concessions, or we hope those concessions in the area of flowers and shrimp above all. So, and then perspectives of growth are not great, like 2% on, because the debt burden. But as I say, the private experts are doing very well. And if Novoa takes the opportunity to make some changes during all these years in which he doesn't have to pay elections, we may be getting rid of some of the main roadblocks to have more investment and increased economic growth. So I've become rather an optimist from what I have seen in the last few months. I think I'm overdue to stop talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you very much. I guess we're going to now continue with the questions. Maria Rosa?
Okay, thank you, Juanita. I encourage everyone, to use the Q&A button if you have additional questions. Now, I will start with Mike Fitzpatrick. He asks, what would be a better way to prevent the speculation and encourage formal mining? Walter, do you want to?
Well, we addressed the point before, so I think I will continue. I would think the president should, it's something he doesn't like doing, but something he should do. He should express what his policies, priorities are. I think he should make it publicly that Ecuador needs that mining investment. And then every country in the world does mining and takes care about environmental problems. And I think the is also have to show with more rapid approval of licenses, because we have a situation in which when a company wants to have an authority to proceed with developing a mine, he has two separate issues. One is that they have to make a consultation on the environment, and then the government has to do a consultation with indigenous groups where they accept the mining, and both things tend to take a long time. I think that the government should also try to find a solution to the case of Dundee, which is right now an important roadblock. I think the government should tell the Cuenca authorities that they should agree on an impartial third party to judge, to come to compare the environmental program presented by Dundee and whatever they have received from environmental groups, and to decide whether there is any truth or any real danger that the Cuenca water is going to be affected by the mining. And if they solve that particular issue, it will be, I think, a very good sign to the international mining community.
Let me jump with some ideas, Maria Rosa. And Walter mentioned this fee that is being charged to those who are holding concessions in the mining sector. This is creating a lot of noise in the industry, because if you can imagine, for a small company that is actually in the exploration stage, all the money that they get from investors is basically to continue drilling and to see the quality of the assets. But if you put a fee on them, you are actually precluding any chance for them to continue in exploration stage, and they are going to quit. And there has been already some companies that have left the country because of that fee. Just to give you a number, and a small company that has an capitalization value in Toronto for about $50 million is being charged a fee of around $35 million annually. So for that company, it is impossible to continue in the exploration stage. I think the government should start thinking about maybe moving that to extraction stage, increase the amount of royalties or any other measure that would allow small companies to continue developing their mines without paying fees.
That's a very good point. Simon Bever, he has a question for you, Santiago. Santi, can I ask a follow-up on the excess domestic liquidity in banks? Where is it going? Is the finance ministry taking advantage to use this source of financing to reduce reliance on external financing?
Hey, Simon, nice to hear from you. Okay, the story on the banking sector is basically that this external liquidity is being injected into the economy, but banks in general are having a harder time to identify good customers in order to lend money. So who is profiting from this situation? Basically, AAA corporations, domestic corporations, who have performed liability management transactions with banks, and they are just basically kicking payments into the future at very reasonable rates. Also, some good, well-qualified customers, households, they are also taking advantage of this excess liquidity. Interest rates have decreased slightly. Banks in general have received some pressure from the government. We had that episode in March this year when the Ministry of Finance approached banks in order for them to acquire some additional bonds, and banks agreed at that time. Right now, they are not willing to take additional position in domestic debt, and they are not being forced. So we have to be clear about that. So the excess liquidity remains there, waiting for additional lending to be disbursed. But they are having excess liquidity right now, but they prefer to have that instead of continuing lending to not that well qualified customers. So excess liquidity is expected to remain in place for the next couple of months.
Santiago, to follow up in the prior question, I have this question from Mike Fitzpatrick, and it says, do you see the Noboa government putting in place a better tax system for mining exploration to incentivize both exploration and exploitation of prospects?
Mike, we expect that to happen in the future, but honestly, it has been a very painful process for mining companies. They have approached the Minister of Mining and Environment, but since that decision to impose the security fee on the mining sector was called by the current minister, it has been very difficult for them to get higher ranks, meaning talking to the government with the president directly. So they have not been able to have a direct conversation about the implications of this security fee. Hopefully in the future, they are going to make some changes, especially moving from exploitation fees into extraction fees.
Walter, we have a question here from Andrew Levine. The IMF is demanding a fiscal reform reducing tax expenditure. Do you expect the government to submit one?
Well, that's in the letter of intention which the government presented, and they have starting to do that. It's well, for instance, we have now these investment contracts that the government, Novoa, continued what last year did of meeting with going to international meetings and offer a generous package of tax incentives from investments. And whenever they get back to Ecuador with the companies, they heard possible investors that have heard about this, try to have investment contracts that the Ministry of Economy says no, because that exceeds our tax expenditures, and they block that. So I think that the government is going to move from the different things I've been reading. Reading into what they've been saying, I believe they're going to draw tougher conditions for giving tax incentives to businesses that are going to invest. I don't think they're going to give it to business that would invest anyway, or to business that are not bringing in new technology. It's going to be tougher to get to that type of benefit. So they're going to reduce the type of tax expenditure. Another one they did is that they have taxed the part of the equity of banks, equity of businesses. They have taxed their reserves. Actually, that's been forcing businesses to just give dividends to their investors and then draw down their reserves, which is going to reduce the possibility of these businesses to invest further, but it's creating revenues to the government. So they are acting in that front, and we could expect similar measures. I don't and try to eliminate some exclusion from taxes, but it's going to be one by one, little by little. They're going to continue in this particular process, and as I said, what they're going to try is to increase revenues, but try not to take more measures that affect directly the mass population. So yes, I do expect measures to that type.
Okay, Santiago, there has been a rumor that the current government was seeking to increase the drilling in the Amazon and also to reopen the Catastro Minero this year. Any comments on that?
I think the mining issue was covered already by Walter, but talking about oil, the government has made announcements about new oil rounds going up to 2027, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know exactly how ambitious they are, especially the first ones, the ones scheduled for 2026 and early 27. But the government has a major issue on how to do about oil. The, the, the total amount of crude oil during this year has averaged only 470,000 barrels per day. Remember that at some point Ecuador was pumping 550,000 barrels per day. So there has been an important decrease, and we have not shut down the ITT drills that are still there. They have closed only around 20 oil fields out of 225 in the ITT project. So when they complete to shut down all the ITT project, oil production will go down by 14%. So the situation is very difficult, but it has been difficult for Ecuador to attract big players in the oil industry, and you can understand why. Basically, they face a major reputation risk when they come to Ecuador, since they are going to be pumping oil from rainforests, national parks. So these are the kind of things that large corporations, large oil companies want to avoid. For that reason, Ecuador has been receiving second-tier players in the oil industry with the technology, perhaps, but without the financial support. So I don't know if the government wants to go that route. They have tried in previous years to bring a lot of players, but the outcome in terms of additional production has been close to zero.
Which other sectors in Ecuador show the strongest growth potential for new investment?
I would say the shrimp industry has been an outstanding sector in the last couple of years. We saw that transaction when Mitsui acquired Santa Priscilla in 2023, was the largest transaction of a shrimp asset in Ecuador. That sector has been receiving additional investments for not only to shrimp farms, but other producers or service providers to that industry. So we see a lot of potential there. Then I will say there is also some potential in agribusinesses. Given our natural endowments, our position in the globe, the amount of sunlight that we receive, you can expect that sector has a lot of potential. There has been more investment in agribusiness. I think that is the future in Ecuador, honestly. Hopefully, you need to improve security situation in order to attract more players in that sector.
I like another sector, which is going back to the mining area. You have this huge mine being developed in Imbabura provinces, north of Quito, near the border with Colombia, and that mine they're going to have to export probably through Esmeraldas, which doesn't have neither adequate transportation to get to Esmeraldas nor an adequate port at Esmeraldas. Then right now you have the two major mining companies there. They are on the Condor Range that have to take their products out to the ports in the southern part of Ecuador, such as Puerto Bolívar and Guayaquil, and through a very flimsy third-grade road. And now you have some other important mines in the process of being developed in the same area. So you're going to need both adequate infrastructure to get from those mines. We're talking about copper, and it's not being copper is not being processed in the mines. It's going to be exported, the ore. And you need to have these new ports to be built for handling mines in Guayaquil or in Puerto Bolívar. And then you also have two middle-sized mines in the Western Andes that have been developed right now. How you're going to get those minerals out? And in addition, all the power all of these companies are going to need are roughly equivalent to Ecuador's consumption today in power. So you need a huge investment in power generation. So I think that the mining sector is going to need a huge investments in power generation, in road construction, and in port facilities. So infrastructure is going to be an important area of investment as a consequence of the development of mines.
Thank you so much. How important is to hear you guys, because there's so many other opportunities. You know, we obviously are a country that has so many opportunities that are waiting for investment. I'm sure we will need the right moment. But how much, Walter, do you think that the security crisis is impacting Ecuador's economic performance?
Well, it is important economic performance. One of the huge impacts it has is on small entrepreneurs, because what you have extortion for bribes. People that have a small shop are being asked by these bands to pay a fee for being allowed to operate. And those fees are not that small. And they say, well, if you don't pay this fee, I kill you, or I kill somebody in your family. And they do that. And actually, as a person I know, there was a driver that I used as a taxi. Then I called him and he drove people in my family for here and there. He was killed because he had refused to pay bribes to whoever was bribing him. So that's one of the reasons too, where you tend to have, or you tended to have people trying to migrate, because they have to close down their shops and they have no other opportunities, and so they left. And I mentioned shops, but people didn't have shops; they were just independent handymen who were carpenters or whatever, and they were also being asked to pay a ransom for part of their earnings, not to be kidnapped or somebody in his family killed. So that's one of the things that I don't think the government is doing enough, because the government's policy of taking leaders, well, these leaders are now no geniuses. I mean, they're just the biggest thug in the neighborhood, and then the second biggest thug in the neighborhood takes over. So actually, you have no impact on the operation. You need to go and dismantle these groups and try to have a perennial, a constant presence in the neighborhoods where this type of extortions take place, because that's killing the small economy. For larger businesses, it's a huge expense. For sure, businesses, it's a huge expense. But they are all in the Gulf of Guayaquil. And any transportation around the Gulf of Guayaquil, you need to have you need to have your own private army to be able to move your shrimp. So it's very expensive. So definitely, if we did not have all of this violence, the economy would be doing so much better. On the other hand, some people must be making money rendering their transportation services to the Colombian and Mexican drug rings, and so that money must be making it into the economy too.
Santiago, any closing remarks that you would like to make?
Sure. In general, Ecuadorians are more optimistic about the current situation. I think the economy is performing relatively well. We will hope to see higher growth rates in the near future. We have a strong external accounts, good liquidity in the financial system. In general, the system is with strong levels of liquidity and they are sound. In general, there could be some potential issues in small institutions and in the cooperative sector. But we have that situation that we have never had in the past. So Ecuador with such high level of external accounts is something extremely positive. In terms of fiscal consolidation, more is needed. The government has a golden opportunity to do things in a different way going forward. The population said no to a new electoral process, so that should be taken as an opportunity to recalibrate, change the cabinet, and try to move smart and important pieces of legislation through the Legislative Assembly with the support that the current government has. So this is also a situation that we haven't seen in the past, in the recent past. So we are in general more optimistic about the Ecuadorian future.
Excellent. Walter, how about you, your closing remarks?
Well, I think much rides on the president's ability, and he and his cabinet to take advantage of the opportunities he now have, which is, as we have said repeatedly, Santiago and I that he has an assembly in favor. He doesn't have to appear in front of his electorate again for almost 3 years. For 3 years, so if he's able to get along better with the Constitutional Court, which what I spoke with him did certain time, there is opportunity of things to get definitely much better. But I said much hinges on his ability and how much of experience that his cabinet has accumulated in these 2 years can compensate for the lack of prior experience because they were all very young. So as I said, it all depends what Daniel Noboa does, and hopefully he gets a better advice and he is able to take important decisions, and we have an opportunity to be doing much better than what we have in a long time.
Oh, wonderful. Juana, how about your closing remarks?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Santiago and Walter. This has been an excellent program and help at least to our members and guest friends to get a better idea of what you're thinking about the future of Ecuador, short term, long term, what the good possibilities are for investment, and what do you think it could happen. Ecuador has, as everybody knows, has a lot of potential. So hopefully, we do something soon and to help the country. So I want to thank you very much to Santiago and Walter for this excellent program. Also, I would like to congratulate Alexandra Vaquerizo and Linda Calvet for the great job that they have been organizing this program. So thank you again to all for being here with us today. Maria Rosa, I turn you for the final remarks.
Yes, I'd just like to update everyone on the upcoming program. We have this Wednesday, December 3rd, the Andean American Associations will host their 13th Annual Latin American Outlook 2026. We have this webinar with partners, the Brazilian American and North American Chilean Chambers of Commerce. It will be from 4 to 5. So if you haven't registered, you should be looking for the invitation. We will send once more. As you know, we're a non-for-profit organization, so membership and sponsorships are important. You can always reply to our invitations. And thank you so much for the two of you have been wonderful. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. It's been wonderful, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye. Buenas tardes. Un beso.
Thank you. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. Ciao.